Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the Friendly Differences podcast. I almost said my own one there. Tonight we had a really, really good show. I actually said at the end there that was my favourite show that we've done. So no offense to any of you guys out there, but I think if you watch, you'll see why. It was a very it's a topic that I know it gets a lot of people wound up, especially because it feels as if we're attacking women, which comes with its own warning at times. But no, I loved it. How did you feel, Solid?
I loved it. I love that we had guests that were different. They each came with their own, opinions and what they wanted to say. At one point, the two of us just kind of sat back and just let them go. It was a really good episode, and we covered a lot.
Yeah, we not only covered the is it a man's world? It is kind of a vague topic, but I think
Mhm.
you'll see from the outset. I had my subheadings. The gender pay gap, the relationships, the court system, all that is in there. But I also enjoyed the back and forth that our two guests had.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's made me think a lot. And as you say, me and you were just sat there. Um, no, it was good, really good.
I was going to say, for once, Bob and I just sat there. We weren't going back and forth at each
Yeah,
other. But yeah, so guys, I hope you like it because it really was a good show.
yeah. So it should be out if I'm able to get it out tomorrow. I will do, and next week's show, I believe, again, solid. It's
It is on relationships.
yeah, and
And
we have a
then
familiar face returning in the form of Reagan, and
Reagan,
we also have
Crazy Train and Co-Train. They are a couple.
mhm,
And they are, I like them. I think you guys will like them too.
yeah. So again, as always, we love to hear your comments. Our TikTok is growing every day. We're now at 3,500 almost. Um, but we would appreciate some comments in the YouTube. If you feel any of us has said anything that you want to push back on, we're always open to new guests. If you want to come on and uh, tell us a subject, because sometimes we often feel that we've got the guests and we want you to tell us what your specialist subject is, if you will.
Mhm.
So we're open to that.
And you can contact us at friendlydifferences at gmail.com, or you can hit us up on a DM on Twitter, or Facebook,
Instagram.
or Instagram, or Twitter.
No.
I'm sorry, or
Uh,
TikTok.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
So okay.
Okay, guys. Until next weekend, we hope you enjoy this one and stay safe. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Right. Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Friendly Differences podcast. I'm your host, Baram Yu. Beside me, which way is it? We have my co host, Solid Blue, as always. Looking very nice, I must say, in the tropical looking
Looking better than
blouse.
yesterday. I was looking
And
rough yesterday.
we've actually got some guests from TikTok that we've managed to put together. I'll start off with Natasha from the Theory Gang. Natasha and I was on a live, and Natasha was watching me doing a poor job of debating someone, and she reached out to me and said, "Let's get together, let's do a show." So we've had her on the list for a while now, and because she mentioned the guy you're all familiar with, I'm sure, Andrew Tate. He's a big name on TikTok right now and on everyone's lips. And I thought this would be a show that Natasha could come on and debate or talk about. And then the next day after that, I was on Mott News, which is Luis, his podcast, and I liked what he had to say. And with your views, which I won't ruin, I thought that's like that end of the spectrum covered. I think you're going to be the more conservative, views tonight, which I am as well, but I think you're maybe more. So it's just about getting that right balance. And we're going to cover, is it a man's world? So I'm sure I've left it open. Everyone's got their own views on it. But for me, I have a few topics like talking about the gender pay gap, talking about feminism, talking about relationships, and overall how the world is shaped to favor the sexes either way. So I've got a few notes and things, and I'm just intrigued to see how the conversation will go. So I'll pass it over to my co-host Solid to give your opening statement, if you will, and then we'll go from there.
Well, I'm actually going to pass it over to Natasha and then to Louise, and let you guys if you guys want to say anything about yourselves, or and then we can jump into the show. But I'm going to kind of sit back and kind of listen, because first of all, I have to say, someone is more conservative than Ba. I'm shocked. So, Natasha, not to put you on the spot, maybe you want to tell a little bit about yourself, and
Yeah, sure. So I am a neuroscientist. I'm also a podcaster. I have one podcast called Syllogism, which is basically a science, culture, philosophy challenge podcast where my co-host and I just pretty much see what we can argue about every week. So we'll do something fun, a challenge, and then we'll come on and talk about it. I'm also starting another podcast called Neo Academia, because I always wanted to be an academic, but academia is fucked, for lack of a better term. So I'm looking at kind of how the structure of academia might be changing, how we can still explore concepts outside of it. So I'm really interested in science, culture, all these kinds of topics. Politically, I'm probably pretty moderate. I like to flip-flop. I like to kind of argue the point. And I'll just say this, that I think the entire question is flawed. Is this a man's woman or a woman's world? I think it's a silly question. It's for both of us. But it is a human's world, I think, at this point, in terms of who's on top of the food chain. So it's really in our hands, but I think we could argue this either way. Is it a man's world? Is it a woman's world? And I'll probably take whatever points are left. I'll take the scraps and argue for those.
Okay. All right. Luis, welcome.
Yeah. So I'm Luis Acevedo, the founder of MOT Media. We have several different podcasts that we run. One is on sports. Well, actually just a couple. So one's on sports and the other is on culture, politics. And I'm the main host for that one. And then on Tuesdays and Fridays, I have my co-host, Mick. He's the one that runs the MOT Today One channel. And we get together twice a week, discuss cultural topics and political news that's going on during that day, during the week, etc. I'm also I'm a business owner as well of a commercial cleaning company. I have some academic backgrounds as well, although I did drop out of university because I was debt-free at the time, and I am religious, and so I guess I can go into that little backstory. I had all the grades required to get it accepted into this really big university in the state I live, and I started a debate club, was the president of the debate club for 2 years, and was going for history, was going to go be law school. That was the end goal. But I ended up praying. I was like, hey, if this is for me, let it be, because it was a free scholarship. It was full ride scholarship. And the grade requirements were like a 3.6. And that was really the only requirement, and just to show up to class. And so I had a 3.8, had all these credentials. I've always been entrepreneurial, so I had like a t-shirt company I was running at the time, failed, not doing that anymore. But all these credentials, and I didn't have debt. This was the big thing. So I was like, do I want to take on this debt for law school? Well, I'll get the free education. I'll have to take out like $200,000 in debt. And well, I didn't get accepted. I was the only one in my cohort that did not get accepted. So I took that as a sign that I should just drop out. So I dropped out right there. And, I've worked on cars a lot of my life too. So went back to that, kept trying other businesses. And now I have a pretty successful business in the commercial cleaning commercial cleaning company. And the media company, it's taken off slowly but surely. It's a little harder to monetize that, especially with my views. I would definitely consider myself to be more alt-right than anything. And I would agree with Natasha that it's a human's world. So I don't know exactly where we want to start off with this, but it's definitely a human's world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, you guys have given me some jumping off points, so I guess I'll jump over the cliff. So Natasha, I want to go to you. You said that academia you thought is flawed, which I think that it is, and you think that the topic is silly, and that is fine. That's fine. So I have two questions. Do you think academia is, or for all of you, do you think academia is more for men as opposed to women, considering that way back when women were not even allowed to even go to school? And I'm talking about all women, not certain cultures or colors or whatever. Women were not allowed to go to school. So do you think that academia, for the most part, leans towards men? And then for my second point is it a man's world? Well, yes, it is a world for men and women and everyone, dogs, cats, whatever. But does it, again, lean towards men?
Okay. So I think if we define the question a little bit more in terms of where does the power lie? Does most of the power lie? And we have to, of course, define power. But I think of power as the ability to do what you want to do in this world. So then we could probably argue that point a little bit cleaner in terms of, is it a man's woman or a world or a woman's world? And then we're talking about currently. So what you said about academia is true. I mean, women weren't really even allowed to work. But we're going to have to fact check this afterwards. But I'm pretty sure in the US currently, the most credentialed people are Nigerian women. So Nigerian women are winning the credentialing academic game in terms of degree seeking. But on the flip side of that, in terms of scholars and people, I don't think of students as scholars. Mm-hmm. Students have scholarly attributes, but they're usually trying to get a degree to get a job. So they're checking a box. And in terms of a scholar is someone who's pursuing knowledge for the sake of knowledge, and that is their career. And in terms of scholars, women are losing because the academic system has a leaky pipeline. So while we try to, a lot of us who are more liberal minded have tried to create an interest in STEM and academics and all this stuff for women because, the affirmative action kind of hypothesis that if we get more people involved at the start of the pipeline, then you'll see more come through. But it's leaky. And so there's a lot of attrition when it comes to women being scholars and academics because women have babies. So far, I've never seen a biological man carry a baby. So having done that myself, I can tell you during those 9 months, your brain changes. I don't know if you have children, solid, but your brain changes. And my goals completely changed. I wanted to be an academic. And then after I had my little baby and had all these other things happening, I was like, fuck that. And so I leaked out the pipeline, even though I was kind of a golden child, had a grant, had a really great shot, had an awesome, almost Nobel adjacent postdoc lined up. My husband was like, hey, I want my career. And so I was like, oh, okay. All right. Well, let's go towards your career for a minute. I did my thing for a little while. You moved to Chicago with me. Now I'll move with you. So women naturally leak out of the pipeline. So they start out strong in degree seeking. But in terms of scholarly work, it's still a man's world.
But do you think that men understand that? Do you think that men, because a lot of, some men would say, and even women, that motherhood should be oh my God, you all can be mothers. But do men understand that? Because I will say, literally, my son was born on he is now 22. My son was born on a Monday. literally that Saturday and Sunday, I was still doing everything that I was doing. I was doing everything I was doing up until I went to the doctor that Monday. And my doctor, I was 37 weeks, and she heard something, said we're going to, we have to go now, whatever. But literally, I was in the hospital. I got out the hospital that Thursday. My life was completely different. It was just completely different. All the things that I wanted to do and what have you. Thankfully, I have a husband who always had my back and said, "You go ahead if you want to do this, blah blah blah, whatever." But do you think men understand how much women go through or even give up? Not that we don't want to be moms or whatever, but it's like your life is still, for the most part, still going on. You still go to work. You can still sit and watch, the game or whatever. But women, do you think that men understand that?
I mean, I'll let the men answer, but I'm just going to say women's brains are wired differently, period.
Mm-hmm.
Hard stop. So no, they literally can't understand. We think differently. We accomplish tasks differently.
Okay.
So
I will be quiet. Louise or Bob, whoever wants to jump in.
Louise, do you want to take this one?
Sure. I mean, as far as like our men understanding, I mean, she hit it right on the head with, our brains are different. Like, this is a hard reality most people don't want to accept today, but this is very true. I am a father. I have 3 children. One's on the way, so the third one's still in there, getting ready to come out. But yeah, so women do sacrifice a lot, and I appreciate the sacrifice that my wife makes to raise our children. We're very fortunate in that this is the only thing that came out of the whole cough and sniffle debacle, is that my wife has been working from home ever since that started. And we don't know, well, we know for a fact she would not be working if she had to go back into the office. So that's the only reason why she's still working right now. And I guess that is not really a sacrifice on her part, but it is difficult for her to juggle getting the work that she has to do still. And she does prioritize the kids over the work, even though she's supposed to technically, be working full time. But I would also say that men sacrifice a lot too in having a family. Like for example, I have to work my ass off. I have to work a lot harder to provide for my family and make sure that if something happens with my wife's position, which is okay if it does, but I just have to be able to carry the load of providing for everybody. And I think that there's this misconception amongst the alt-right, I would say, and even for more conservative men and Christian and religious men, is that women aren't supposed to work. And that isn't true. I think that there's a big misnomer on that. So women in like traditional relationships, the way they function is like this. There's roles in different periods of your life. And so once you become a mother, your priority as a woman should be to raise that child, because as Natasha said, and you as well, solid blue sister.
Yes, solid. Solid's fine.
Solid, okay. Like your whole world changes and you just want to focus on your child, right? But let's say you do need to make some more money and help out your husband. Well, I think that the compromise at that point would be finding things to do from home and involving the children. That can be a, aspect of homeschooling, a type of homeschooling in a way to show them a business mind in that regard, and like what you can do, like how to make things. Like if you're going to bake, you can incorporate math in that, sales, marketing, so many other things. Gardening as well. You can sell flowers, you can sell your greens, whatever. So there's a lot of things that, women can do in the home to make money if needed. But men, I think that the sacrifice men make is spending less time with their family. But this is where men are more capable of spending less time with their family, right? Especially, as I'm sure we all know here, like when you have a child, a man's testosterone level drops. And, that's so the man doesn't go crazy, right? With high testosterone here and a crying baby. What's that?
Temporarily.
Yes. But this temporarily is key because, as me for an example, I can't do what my wife does, right? I can't sit here 8 hours a day with my children. I don't have the patience for that. I know that might sound wrong, but I'm sure you guys get what I mean. I'm just not as nurturing and caring. I'd rather go out and conquer the world with my businesses. But I'm willing to make that sacrifice, not only for just my biological. It's not even a sacrifice for my biological desires or anything, but more so for my family. Like but it's making a sacrifice to spend more time outside of the home than in the home. Right. So there's sacrifices that both sexes make in order to provide for their family. If that makes sense, it went all over the place there, but.
So you're speaking from your perspective, but there are other people like me as a woman. I love my daughter. She is the number one priority. But if I'm really honest with myself, I'm very career minded. I'm obsessive. I could be one of those people who goes off and studies polar bears in the Arctic for 6 months. I could be. Having my daughter, I'm kind of like, yeah, no, I don't want to be a dirtbag parent. So I'm not going to do that. So my mentality is probably a little bit more masculine in that department, in what motivates me and what drives me. So what do you say to people who, we're not a monolith. Women are not all one thing. Men are not all one thing. There may be men who are interested in kind of being more at home. So don't you think that there's variability in this and it doesn't have to be that way? It's not like, oh, the man has to do this. It's 2022 for crying out loud.
But
Yeah.
Natasha,
So
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll take that one because it kind of leads into what I was going to say. But first and foremost, can I ask why you guys chose to use the word sacrifice when having a child?
I knew you were going to pick up on that.
That's a horrible phrase.
Well, see, and I don't think that it is. And I'm going to say this, Natasha, I totally get what you're saying when you say that you can just take off for like 6 months, whatever. Oprah, I'm not a fan of Oprah. I'm not a fan of Oprah. But years ago, she had a woman on who said that her family and her children are not her life. They're a part of her life. And so many women in that audience and some men just totally slammed her. And when I thought about it, I said, she's absolutely right. And, because my family is not my life, because I have a life, when I die, I'm dead, I'm gone. They're not my life. They are a part of my life. And there are some things, whether you want to use the word sacrifice or give up, again, like I said, women, I had my baby, my husband went back to work and he was doing things and I'm calling him. I'm like, well, are you going to come and do this? I need you to do this and that. He's sitting at home playing games. So and I will say my mom, she went on vacations without us. She went and did the girl stuff without us. And and one thing that she said is, when you guys get married, and my father said the same thing, make sure you marry a spouse who, if you want to go off and do your own thing, because sometimes you are ready to pull your hair out, he's not going to be going, well, you need to stay home and whatever. And thankfully, I have that husband. I will go off when my son was little, whatever. I'm like, I'm going to do this on this day. You need to stay home or whatever. And he did. So it's not I think you're taking the word.
No, then
you're putting too much into it, as opposed to.
Well, then, to help me understand why you chose that word, because I think there is a reason, whether it's conscious or subconsciously, and I hear this a lot. It's the indoctrination of what they're telling you, that having a child is a burden over. You let me finish.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, they're brainwashing the youth of today, like, oh, don't have children, don't be a slave to the household, do a career, have a career, and be a slave to the tax system, not your man, be a slave to this tax system. So the fact that you chose the word sacrifice, and I'm thinking, okay, help me understand better by saying, what did you sacrifice to have that child? What did you sacrifice?
A lot.
Nights out?
Well, I would say this. I would say this. I mean, if we're going to get technical on the definition, there's several definitions of sacrifice, and one of them is basically to give up something of value for something more important.
Mm-hmm.
Fine.
So you can make the argument that, hey, my career is very valuable. Somebody can reasonably argue that. I get what you're saying, but I would say that you can consider having a child a form of sacrifice to a degree. Obviously, when, like, for instance, you can say investments and like investing in the stock or crypto is a form of sacrifice as well, because as opposed to just sitting it in like a safe, you're putting it in the stock market where you maybe can't touch it if you put it in like something like a bond for 15 years or something, right?
I just think the feeling around having a child, which is the greatest gift that we were ever given, that a woman was given, and not to put the emphasis on that is what a woman's all about, because that's a totally a different subject, but we should be celebrating this. And the language that they use now surrounding having a child, which is an amazing thing, and it should be, is part of the problem, I think. And to answer Natasha's question about the gender roles, and I've always said, especially when it comes to these types of arguments, whether it's feminism and all that, is I openly talk, like I'll go on and say things that I know is going to trigger a lot of people, but I also say that if the woman makes a certain amount that can cover the family, I would be an advocate of the man staying home. I think one parent staying home and looking after, because Solid, you just mentioned it there, and I know there's that common saying about it takes a village or it takes a town to raise a child, and you're taking away, like what happened in the 60s with that wave of feminism that basically conned women into what I said earlier about don't be a slave to the family household, go into the workforce, and then they doubled the taxes, and then you're no better off. And now women have abandoned their children, or men have abandoned their children, and children are being brought up by the state. And that is the biggest con that's ever been up. It's up there with one of the biggest cons that's ever been perpetrated, on us. And now there's no going back. So because of feminism in the 60s, I think it was 1963, and that woman you mentioned to me yesterday, Solid.
Betty Friedan.
No.
Gloria Steinem.
Gloria Steinem.
Oh, yeah. Gloria Steinem, yeah. I saw her speak at a convention once. It was, But you're absolutely right, Ba. Like, women lost the sexual revolution because we do more work now than men do and get paid less. Possibly we lost, right? But maybe it's a long game. Maybe there's something we have gained yet, and we just haven't figured that out yet. But I agree, like the sacrifice thing, here's the way I think of the sacrifice is we live in a society where classical liberal values are still there, meaning everybody wants to be able to do what they want to do, at least for now. No one in this country is forced really to do what the collective wants them to do entirely, right? We're not a collectivist society. We're still an individualist society. And so I'm getting a video call. Sorry. So the sacrifice comes in that you have to give up your individual ambitions, dreams, goals, hopes for something greater than yourself, for something other than yourself. So that's why I think of it as a sacrifice, is because I'm giving up what I want to do. Excuse me.
Well, see, and then not only that, when Bob says that he thinks that one parent should stay home, everybody cannot stay home. Everybody just can't. Everyone can't have that, mom with the pearl necklace, like, Leave It to Beaver, who is, staying home. Everybody can't. Can't hear you. Can you all hear me?
I can hear
you.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Can't hear though. Yeah.
Bye.
So what I would respond to that while he's getting that set up is that you don't need to have a lot of money to be able to have one parent stay at home. This is something that's insane. Like, no, you don't. Money is not required to live. Money is not. Money makes life easy. It makes it convenient. But there are plenty of people, if you give them $1 million, right, and they live a natural life, they're going to do nothing with that $1 million. They'll burn that $1 million for more.
Absolutely.
And so money is not required to live. It literally is not required to live. There are many impoverished people who have better lives than those who are in the top 1%. And I think that there's a lot of empowerment that can come out of being impoverished as well. And I think that this is another sacrifice people should make in order to raise good families. But now everybody's chasing the dollar and material and vanity. That does you nothing, but your children will pass on your bloodline, hopefully forever, right? I mean, obviously our bloodlines have kept going for a long time, millions of years, maybe. Nobody really knows, right? But
no, we know.
No, no, we don't.
No,
actually.
we know. It's not millions
No.
of years. Humans been around
No.
a couple 100,000 years. We know it's not
We don't
millions.
know. Evolution is a theory. I mean, we can go down that whole thing. It's
Okay.
not,
All right.
nothing's
Let's
really
not.
grounded. Yeah, it's hard to say that you know something that goes back hundreds of thousands of years, especially with carbon dating. There's a lot of, and also the reproducibility crises that comes out right now in science. So, I mean, you know, that's a huge thing. So it's anyway, but yeah, I mean, just sacrifice the money to raise your family, because your kids are the best investment you'll ever make in your life. I mean, and also it just helps your children as well. Show them that, hey, I'm willing to put you over working 80, 90 hours a week. And I think the ideal world would be the woman doing that, obviously, because the women are built biologically for that. And I know that we can say this is a general statement. There's more nuance to it. There's a spectrum. But generally speaking, this is true. And this is the way it's always has been until very recently. Like, this is a very recent thing where the men will stay home. That didn't exist long ago. So, I mean, you don't need to have a pearl necklace. You don't need to have a lot of money to stay at home and take care of your children. That's false.
No, but you have to work. You have to have some money. I mean, you literally cannot live without some currency.
What I was going to say to that, can you hear me now?
I agree with that.
Yeah, I was going to say, now we can't go, now one parent can't stay at home because of what happened in the 60s. That's why I was telling you that women were conned into the workforce so that they could tax two people instead of just one. And now there's no going back. So that's why I'm saying it's one of the biggest cons that's ever.
Wait, so you think that all women who wanted to go into the workforce was con?
Not all, because I was thinking about it as well. I was like, I was actually going to phone my grandmother today and say, when you decided to go and get a job one day, was it because you felt, or was it just you were bored? Because there's a difference here. Because what you were saying earlier about making a sacrifice or having a career, I was going to ask you, did you wait until your children were of a certain age before you went back? Because I look at my sister, who I think is an amazing mom. What she does is her partner works the normal 8 till 5 or whatever, and then comes in, they get an hour together, and then she goes out from 6 till midnight. She works at a drive-through McDonald's or Burger King. And I only thought about that today because I knew we were doing the show, and I'm like, that's very admirable. It's obviously, I don't know if they made that decision. I'm not, in those conversations, but I think that's good. They're valuing, they're bringing up their own children. They're not allowing daycare centers and nannies to bring up their children. That's the problem. And again, when I talk like this, it's almost like, and I know you feel I'm attacking the woman, but the point that makes I feel kind of like you can't really push on me is because I also say I'm okay with the man staying home. So that's what makes it okay. This isn't an attack on women.
But you're still doing and either or. What if both parents want to work? I mean,
then don't have children. Or I mean, I'm not telling you don't have children.
Okay, so you're assuming that those two people who choose to work are not going to be good parents because both of them are working.
Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but I have to push back because I'm sorry. Both of my parents worked, and my sister and I'm sorry, I'm just gonna say it. We are awesome, and we have raised. I'm serious, and we have raised some awesome kids, and we have achieved things and done things. And our parents, they loved us. They did everything for us. I mean, we were not lacking in hugs and whatever, as someone else had once said, whatever. So, because I think that is slamming people who both parents work and they love their kids just as much as the family who has one parent that stays home. So,
but you're also criticizing people who don't want to have children. And so you're really only giving them one option. Maybe you're not a classic liberal then. I'm wrong about you, because a classic liberal thinks people should have choices. And it seems like you have more mandates than choices. So they should work, and they need to have children and stop being conned into thinking there's a sacrifice. I'm not talking to you, Solid. I'm talking
you talking about Jabba? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I'm
yeah,
not-
I'm not a classic liberal. I'm conservative leaning. Yeah.
Well, no, conservatives are classic liberals. So everyone gets the term liberal wrong. Liberal doesn't mean progressive. Okay. Liberal is not the opposite of conservative. Conservatives are the classic liberals of today, supposedly. Now, the question is, are you authoritarian or are you liberal? Are you illiberal or are you liberal? Meaning, do you think there should be mandates on how we live, or do you think people should have individual rights?
Individual rights.
Okay, then you're a liberal. You are, but this is the thing everybody's like not realizing in this day and age. What you call liberals are not liberals anymore. They're illiberal. They are authoritarian. They think everyone should live this way. And you're saying that you're a liberal, but then you're saying everybody should live this way. So you're not being very liberal.
I'm not saying people. I mean, I'm all for choice. Like, I think when we get further into we could probably touch on it now. The arguments that I hear a lot with the feminist stuff is about, or even the other issues that are in the limelight right now is more opportunity of equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome, opportunity of outcome. So basically, with the women, and they feel that they take a percent of hyper-driven men that are at the top of society, or they're running, and they will use that to further an agenda. And that's happening a lot with other examples, the race example, the trans example, whatever. That they'll take a small subject of men or white men, whatever they want to demonize, and they'll use it to further an agenda. So what I say is, what's happening now is they are replacing the demonized group, whether it's white men, whether it's straight men, whatever, and they're now being authoritarian by swapping them out, which is wrong. That concept in itself is wrong, because you are now allowing people to be racist or to be whatever against a certain group in favor of the one that was oppressed, which two rights don't make a wrong. So in regards to, like, I always ask the question, or I've heard this being asked today in my research, is, so what would you be okay with? Are you okay with 50-50? Like, do you start making the bricklayer society, like the bricklaying, which is 99% men? Do you want that 50-50, or do you just want the big high paying jobs, and how do you do it? Do you start saying to men, we're not taking you on, we're taking on women, which is against men, and then you end up ruining the country, because your country goes to shit, because you're not hiring the best people for the job, you're hiring to get diversity, which ends up ruining it. And there's examples of that throughout time. I think Sweden's the one that everyone points at. They gave that they did that, and it ruined their country. Now they let people choose, and it's like 20-1 nurses are female, 20-1 bricklayers are male. So when you give a population choice, men and women sort themselves out back into the groups that are all demonized. Teachers is another one. I listened to a male teacher today saying that he's not privy to some conversation. He feels left out because most of the teachers in his school are female, and he's not in it. And I'm like, but yet there's not that big push in society or on social media about men in industries are feeling like this. It's just the women thing, which again leads into my belief that this is another divide and conquer tactic. It's feminism, it's racism. It's like the cultural Marxists. They'll pick a subject, whether it's feminism, racism, whatever, and they'll demonize people, and it'll just be to divide us. And when you said at the start, Natasha, this is a stupid subject, you're totally right. It's like, but we have to cover it, because I think there's a lot of value in debunking some of this stuff, or maybe enforcing it, and maybe seeing where we do need to work together. So
Yeah, I think we do need to work together. And I agree that this is a very divisive topic. And the funny thing about diversity is we're talking about bricklayers. Like, I don't know how you want to spin this, but they're not very diverse either, because the men that come lay that bricks at my house, they either working class white dudes, which not usually. The working class white dudes are the project managers, but it's a whole heap of Mexicans that come lay bricks at my house. So, but we don't want to talk about that. You're absolutely right. Nobody wants to talk about that. But women are not interested in those jobs. And let me take the argument that people often take with me, even though I don't believe it. I'm a neuroscientist. I do believe that the brain is hardwired differently, that there are differences but there's an overlap, right, between men and women. But there are differences inherently in how males and females function, their desires, their thoughts, and stuff like that. But a lot of people are saying that the desire, for example, to not be a bricklayer is socialized. Do we think that men and women are socialized different? If so, how much of that is, nurture versus nature? I have my opinion, obviously, but this is the big argument: is that we're socializing little girls, and we could speak about the Swedish experiments as well, the Nordic countries. What happens when you socialize little girls differently? Would that debunk this idea? I don't know.
But I mean, I'm listening to you guys, and just so you all know, I grew up with a father who, as he always said, I want to make sure my girls know how to do certain things. I know how to, when I go get my oil change, I change my oil. I know how to do that. I know how to do a lot of things. In fact, in my house, I probably take care of more of the handiwork in my house than my husband does. I know how to do just a lot of things that a lot of women don't. And my father wanted us to know this because he says, if you ever get stuck, stranded, whatever, you don't have to, depend on anyone, because that person may not be there for you. Do not be that one sitting there, being that woman, sitting there and not knowing how to do anything. So yes, that's probably the reason why I think the way that I do, and he said, and both of my parents, but more so my husband, or my dad, do not get married until you have done this, and this. And I got married late. I traveled. I had a job where I was going literally all over. I love my job. And I knew that I always wanted to work. But again, this is how I was raised. Learn to do things on your own, because that phone call may not be there. The neighbor may not be able to help you if your husband dies or whatever. Know how to do things on your own.
So you were socialized, but the question is your sister as handy as you are?
She is.
Oh, she is.
I mean,
so
maybe
maybe it's genetic.
When I was 16 years old, and I still have it, when I was 16, for one of my Christmas presents, my father got us a tool chest. I was 16, my sister was 18, whatever. I still have it, and I'm still pulling it out. In fact, I was using it yesterday. I'm pulling it out, I'm doing, whatever. And I get my husband's tool. I mean, it's like so, and this is what I'm also teaching my son. Know how to do things on your own, because someone may not be there to help you. I don't think that that's wrong, or think that a man should do this or a woman should do this. If a woman wants to be a bricklayer, bless her heart. If a man wants to come in and cook, more power to you. I think you should have you should have whatever job makes you happy. If you're good at it, do it.
Mm-hmm. Preach.
Yep.
I do think, even though I do know that there are differences, like we can talk about women's abilities in a sense versus male abilities. Women definitely are more multitaskers. Women handle, like in neuroscience, there's something called a forced swim test, where you drop rats in a bucket of water and they have to find the platform. It's a measure of depression. It's also a measure of motivation, a couple things. But the male rats and the female rats find the platform differently. And for the longest time, they thought, okay, this means that male rats have a better spatial ability with direction. They can figure things out. But then when they approach the platform, male rats will just jump straight up on the platform, whereas female rats will look around for kind of the easiest way up. And if you decrease the stress in the experiment, they both approach the same way. They both approach straight up, right? So I think there are differences between men and women, the way we function. But I think if we decrease the barriers, like lowering the stress in the experiment, men and women will fall naturally more towards the center, sharing a lot of abilities. If we decrease the pressure, like what Luis was saying, if it didn't cost so damn much to live, and there wasn't this pressure to be like, get more with the Joneses, I think we'd see a lot more female-male collaboration and overlap.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And non-binary, or whatever you want to, all the expressions of gender.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Luis, you want to jump in, or are you just sitting back, just taking it all in?
Just listening at this point, I mean, I couldn't disagree more. I think that men and women are biologically different, and that's why they don't do bricklaying. That's why they don't do the manual labor. I mean, it's already proven in the military, they have to lower their stance. I know so many veterans, and they complain about that. They're like, if the women are going to join, don't change the requirements, but they physically can't do the requirements. There's a reason why women don't do those.
Physical. That's physical labor. That's
same
physical
thing with bricklaying. Yes, that's what Bao was saying. The physical manual labor jobs, women shouldn't be there, because then you're just going to slow the work down. It's insane to think that they can do the same ability. I can lift more than any woman I encounter in my life, and I don't even lift weights every day anymore. So it's like, it's not even fair. Most men can do that too, and most men are just more.
There's jobs for women, like in bricklaying. There are jobs for women. Women
should be secretaries and helping, maybe even getting the work lined up, and maybe some marketing. Right?
Wait, what about okay, bro? Let's look at it another way. Like, what about like tile setters?
Yeah, men's job.
Well, okay, I tiled my bathroom 8 months pregnant. Okay, like I'm well, maybe, but there's no physical labor really in tiling except getting up and down, making measurements. There's an artistry.
I don't know any woman in my life that would do that.
I
Not
would
one
do
woman
that
in real
or
life.
can. Would or can.
No, wouldn't. They wouldn't do it.
But
I'm not saying
they can do it.
I'm not saying that they can't do it. I'm saying that they wouldn't do it.
You're saying that they shouldn't.
Yeah, I don't think it's the right place for a woman if they decide. Most women decide not to do that, and I think that reality.
Why
our
are
society,
you the judge of what's the right place for a woman, though? What makes you the authority?
So you look at reality. So you just accept reality for what it is, and then you try to optimize your society, and then you cater to the strengths and weaknesses of the genders, which are only two, by the way. There is not 9. That's nonsense.
Oh no, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're 100% wrong. There are two sexes, mostly. There are two sexes. Gender. No, literally. I'm a scientist. I studied sex differences for my PhD.
Yeah, and this is why we're skeptical of scientists, because you promote this nonsense.
There are two. I'm not promoting any nonsense. I'm telling you there are two sexes, but the expression of, like, if I want to act more masculine, that's a gender expression. Gender and sex are two different things. Now, you're mad at the scientists who say that they're not. You're mad at gender's a new word it's not really, though. It's been a word for about 100 years. It's just changed in how we use it.
In our medical system has been corrupted for the past 100 years.
I agree with that I agree with that. I agree with you.
Yes. Yeah. And so the gender is just nonsense. There's only two. There can't be more. Anytime this is okay. So you're saying you're a scientist. I am, I am proficient in history. And every time the hermaphrodite comes around, society collapses. It's the end of an empire. Once we start accepting transgenderism, we know that the empire's falling.
Well, there are lots of hermaphroditic species, actually, that have survived a very long time. C. elegans is a worm that still exists that's hermaphroditic.
We're talking about humans, though. We're talking about humans.
I thought we were talking about the collapse of empires or the collapse of civilization.
Yes, and the empires consist of humans. I've never seen.
You're talking about like the Roman Empire with like what happened with the salaciousness of the Roman Empire?
Yeah, I mean, that's one example that everybody will use, and then they like to parallel the United States to this as well.
Mm-hmm. But that's more about debauchery, frivolity, and the sexual deviance. I think that you're thinking about is like one of the expressions that people think about as a societal collapse. And truthfully, maybe it's postmodernism that's the problem, not necessarily sexual expression or genders or societal roles. It's postmodernism.
Is postmodern that falls in line with the idea of relativity.
No, it's not. What the problem is saying that sex is a construct. Sex is a physical reality. Gender is a construct. And I think if you ask scientists, they would have a hard time disagreeing with this, like biological science, but for some reason they still do. A lot of scientists still say, trans women are women. It's like, no, trans women are trans women, but they choose to identify. They have a psychological desire to have a gender role as a woman.
And that's called a mental disorder up until recently. It's called gender dysphoria. And that's also something that they've corrupted in our medical system.
I don't know if we're getting off track, but I could talk about mental disorders with you too. But if you, I don't know.
See, the one question, just to interject. See, when you were talking about the bricklayers and all that, and that women aren't, I'm talking to you, Louise. When I hear someone say that, and I do sympathize with what you're saying, I think the reason that we end up arguing in society about those is the way you say it. But I'm not going to ask you a question about that. I'm just going to say, I'm intrigued to know, would you then mandate or make a law that women couldn't be? Like, what's your stance on women wanting to be?
I would optimize that. I would optimize. I am for oppression. I think oppression is a good thing. We know that during the rise of civilization, every civilization has a religious framework it's built upon. And when a civilization is on the rise, it's the most oppressive and it's the most religious, and it has a moral compass. And the social shame is pretty high because they want to optimize reality. They want to optimize humanity to rise. Everyone that's on the rise, they do that. And when they start falling, they get into these idiotic ideas. I'll just call them, they're idiotic ideas that, you can be whatever you want to be. This liberalism, I think, is satanic. I think it's demonic. It's do as thou wilt, which is what Aleister Crowley said. And he was a known Luciferian, known magician. And so this do as thou wilt it's not coherent for society. Oppression isn't a bad thing. And I think it should be more so socially, as in shaming, as in not accepting, as opposed to governments mandating it, because we already have a social contract in which we live in. Nobody needs to tell. I mean, we can debate on words. I think anybody should be able to say any word, but I respect your guys' channel. But there's certain words people don't say because of social stigma. Right? There doesn't need to be a law to say you can't say certain words. Now we're heading into that territory, but the social contract should be aligned for oppressing certain behaviors, especially sexuality. We know that once you allow sexual liberation, all it does is hurt the women. You get on birth control, it fucks up your hormones, which then means you're going to then start dating weak-ass men that you would never date. Fact. These are all facts, and that these are things that people don't like to hear, but this is true. And then also you have the fact that now it's cool to go and have as much promiscuity as you want, have as much sex as you want, and that fucks up the women more than the man. Because women psychologically are damaged after having, this isn't to say men aren't either. I think they are. This is something that this whole alt-right gets wrong, that men can have as many women as they want. That's false. I think that, I won't go down there right now, but pair bonding is a huge issue. And I think that everybody should, if you're going to be intimate with somebody, it should be the person that you're willing to have a child with and marry, because you're subconsciously already saying, I want to have a kid with you if you're sexually aroused by somebody. So this idea of sexual liberation, this idea of letting people work in whatever fields they want to, no, you then cause society to collapse, because this is, I don't know that there's this grand conspiracy about it. I think that there's patterns of behaviors that are spiritual and that are, they break down into fractals. Like the patterns of behaviors create their own kind of fractals. And so there's certain kind of patterns of behavior that are chaotic and destructive. And all of this liberation talk is destructive, is what you do to, the only reason these ideas are about, primarily because the Enlightenment era, was to get rid of the king. And the king represented a, as being in place by God, essentially, in most monarchies. And so what it was an affront on in the physical was God. And then metaphysically, it was also affront on God as well, because the king was ordained by God. So, oppression's not a bad thing. Liberation is evil. It leads to the destruction of societies. I think that there should be more social shaming. I think it will make for a stronger society.
So, Louise, let me ask you this. So you said that, I just want to make sure that I heard you right before I ask you the next thing. You said that people should have sex with the person that they want to make a baby with, or you said
Ideally, yes.
Okay, so why do you think men rape women?
Well, there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, I think it could have to do with wanting to procreate, but it also has to do with, I think, a lot of trauma in the man. I think it's more so trauma based than anything, but naturally, I think it is to procreate in a certain way. I'm not saying it's right. I don't condone raping. I think all rapists should be given the lead pill. I think that's something else that we should start incorporating more is more capital punishment. We should be more liberal with our capital punishment, especially with these people, because we do know that eugenics works in a certain degree, right? This is how we got to a peaceful society in which we live in so far, is because you cut out a lot of these people that have maybe a predisposition to do those kind of activities. So I would say it's mostly trauma, but Natasha's a neuroscientist, so maybe she has a better answer than I do.
So trauma on the man's side.
Yes.
Okay, so does that mean that a man rapes a woman and because of his trauma, then, I mean,
there's a lot of different varieties to trauma.
Maybe he should get a break. Whereas because the reason why I'm asking is because, so what do you say about, which is in the news now, about the man that raped a 10-year-old girl? Mm-hmm. So she's, to me, I'm sorry, she's going through more trauma than he is. And honestly, I don't care about his trauma because you did this to a little girl. Me
either. I agree with you. I'm not saying what trauma is better. I'm not comparing the victim to the rapist trauma. I'm just saying that I think trauma has a lot to do with why people act that way. Okay. And I'm not saying that we should show them sympathy or empathy. I think that they should be out of the gene pool.
Okay, and can I just okay? What about wait, Chacha, I just want to ask one more thing. Yeah. So the people who make the laws that would oppress other people, who do you think should make those laws? Should it be government? Should it be the neighborhood watch people? Should it be the people at the church group? I mean, who do you think should make these laws that would oppress people?
Well, once again, I said that it should be more so of a social contract than government's mandating it. However, government should enforce the laws. That's the government's job.
Okay. Natasha, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, I agree. And I like that you said that. I think this is a very evolved, for lack of a better word, thought process from you, Luis, to say that it is trauma that is the reason why men do terrible things to women. But there's data to suggest that, right? Like you're not just pulling that out of your ass. You're like, that there's data to suggest that this is why men do terrible things. This is why psychopaths do terrible things. Like there's potentially genetics, but there's also a good layer of trauma. So you said a lot. You talked about optimization of society. You talked about the benefits of shaming. You said should a lot. And I was interested because you said you think the social contract is important. So obviously you're a Hobbesian philosopher. You think that there should be a Leviathan, which is fine. I respect all this. But then you come back through with this trauma thing. And you said liberalism is evil, but wouldn't you argue that society is cyclical in that we're always kind of going towards freedom and then towards oppression or authoritarianism, and then towards freedom, then towards authoritarianism? Isn't that kind of the way things are going?
No, I think that it's the opposite. I think authoritarianism typically brings more freedom to the society. That's my argument. Well, oppression is good because you can see it in your personal life. You can break this down into fractals. I mean, this just shows the pattern of reality. Your own personal life, the more disciplined you are, the more you oppress maybe that desire to get a honey bun or, drink a pop or, so that way you can lose weight or, not do the drugs that you were once doing. So oppression leads to freedom.
But that's what I'm saying is on our pursuit to freedom, we start causing oppression. And then on our pursuit to oppression, we start causing freedom. It's cyclical.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So I do agree that societies, civilizations are cyclical. Yes. And that's precisely why I said what I said regarding the rise of it. We know that the rise of it is the opposite of what we're facing now. So yes, we're on the same page.
Yeah. So there is a place then for liberalism, because we would never understand traumas if we hadn't started deconstructing the mind and having liberal ideas. So I agree with you. Like I think postmodernism is a very dangerous tool, much like fire. Fire is a very dangerous tool for humans. But we need these things to serve as a wedge into our progress. So postmodernism helped us open things up to explore them. And then you might go, okay, that's a fucking mess. Let's put that away for now. And I think we should kind of wrap that up and start going in this direction. And then you break it open and explore more. And then you wrap it up. Then you break it open and explore more. It's just a cyclical nature.
So what I would say to that, this is where my religious view comes into play. I think that that's the tree of knowledge of good and evil that we shouldn't have eaten, or we're not ready to. And that's why
we should be fucking cavemen. Is that what you mean? Like we should never progress? Like what?
No, not at all. I think that it's good to acquire knowledge. However, there's certain things like I don't have all the data to back up what I said, but I can logically deduce that it's from trauma. That these are things that you don't need. Like this is.
You're logically deducing it from data, and then you want to talk about you want to talk about the fallibility of data, like carbon dating. So it's like the problem is your entire argument is based on biblical philosophy, which is much like postmodernism, self-referential. It doesn't actually predict the world outside of it. It's self-referential.
I think it does. It does predict the world.
Religion has made no major predictions. Like they're not testable.
Yes, it does. I mean, we can look through at the beginning of the Old Testament on why societies fall. We learn why societies fall from the Bible, and then we can apply that knowledge. They're not testable predictions, though. Because religion is supposed to be more of a general concept of a thing, of what's going on, and then they can give you examples, metaphors, allegories to prove that, and then you can take that and apply it to the real world. So if what's in the Bible can be shown in the real world, and I think that there's many other religious texts that can do the same thing. I think that's ultimately what religion is trying to do, is show us the metaphysical reality, like how our actions and our spiritual behavior affects reality. And so I think when you're looking at it from, I don't know if this is where you're coming from it as, but just purely materialistic, like it's not actually predicting the United States is going to fall in 2050. It's not. Yeah, of course it's not. But it's giving you patterns of behaviors that lead to destruction that you can then apply. That's why these stories have been around ever since man has existed.
But that's conjecture. That's not actually demonstrative. You can have conjecture, and there are plenty of philosophers, like the Greeks made a lot of conjecture about what would happen in the world, and they were right about a lot of things, and religion is often like that. But what you're talking about with the trauma which causes men to rape, like that was acquired through science. Like a lot of our beliefs that we have and the knowledge, the agrarian society were through scientific kind of procedural knowledge.
That there is no, I think science and religion go hand in hand. I don't think that science is a bad thing.
I agree.
Can I interject? Just I was loving that back and forth. By the way,
so was I. So step back and just listen.
I know, and honestly, that really interests me, that kind of stuff. But I think we'll try and stay on topic. But we'll maybe revisit that. But it actually, what Natasha just said there about, and you did mention earlier, and I've got it written down to ask you, because this might be the breakthrough between why me and Solid disagree on a lot of stuff, right? I have this view on people now. I didn't before, but now with this journey I'm on, of pretty much the analogy used was like with the mice or the rats, and you drop them into water, that, right? So I have this view, and I don't know how to put it into words, but maybe you can help me out here. But I see people now with like the trauma and the rape example he just mentioned there, that there are instances in our childhood that make us into who we are. So a rapist or a murderer or an adulterer or a domestic abuser, if you look into their past and how they were brought up by their parents, and you find out that there was patterns there, and that it's gone into their subconscious, and it's molded them, and then they repeat that because they see it as normal behavior. So that rat mice example, and I know I've heard others before, is I think how we are viewed. Like we are one big experiment, and the people that are in charge of our world literally do experiments with rats and mice and then implement it on us. I genuinely do think that.
with the cough and sniffles thing that's just happened. I think they basically did an event 201. So what I'm saying is, and the two examples I've got written down to show you why me and Solid have disagreed before, and we've mentioned at least one of them tonight, which is two parents versus one, and how Solid has that invested, like it's like an emotional, like, so you're saying that parents who both go to work are worse parents than others. I say yes. And I also say, like, the spanking issue, which me and Solid have also argued about, I think it's wrong, and it's teaching children that violence is okay if someone does something wrong and all that kind of stuff. And I do genuinely believe that there is a percentage of that goes into their minds at the way back. And then when they are older, if they were spanked or beaten or whatever, there's an element that will eventually, or might not, come through, and then they might end up beating their wife or husband, for that matter. So do you agree with that analysis from me? Because I do genuinely believe that we are all basically our parents. We are what we see.
You asking me?
Yeah. That was all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's a lot of evidence. It's obviously genetics, but there's something that I think we don't talk about very much, which is called epigenetics. And those are markings that happen to our DNA. And so what we've actually seen, I almost went to a lab to study this, but I studied binge alcohol drinking as well in my graduate school years. And what we saw is, if you binge rats at their reproductive years, and then you expose them to a stress later, they don't do well. And what we found is, because it's not their genes that are altered, it's the markings on their genes. And then we bred those animals later and looked at how their children responded to stress after never having been binged. And they had the same stress response that their unbinged peers did not. And so this is the concept, and I know I'm going to probably get flack for this if anybody listens, but this is the concept of generational trauma that can happen. And this is how I think that there's the diaspora. And obviously it's hard to talk about this in terms of humans. I can only talk about animal studies. But I would hypothesize that generational trauma is passed down in this exact way. And so, yeah, I think we are our parents and we're our grandparents.
I have something to add to that.
Go ahead.
The Bible tells us about this before science. The Bible says you will pay for the sins of your father and your father's father.
Yeah,
that's true. I agree. And I think there are many biblical lessons that are learned intuitively, right? And there's a place for intuition. And the people that wrote the Bible were brilliant. Right. And, whether they were speaking through God's hands or not, who knows? We can't prove it. But it's not to say that there isn't a lot of value in religious texts. It's just, I don't think my laws should be based off of something that I can't really see at this point. Mm-hmm. I'd rather my laws be based off of tangible things that we can all wrap our head around for sure.
So, Ba, this is for you, because Ba has already told me that he thought I was a bad parent because I spanked
but you said as good.
You said I was said I was a bad parent. It's on tape. You said I was a bad parent because I spanked my son. So let me ask you.
I don't have kids, right?
No, he doesn't. So
shut the fuck up.
Let me ask this. So are you saying that my parents were bad parents because both of them worked?
I'm saying they weren't as good as they could have been. That's exactly what I said to you. They're not as good as they could have been.
Okay, so considering that, I know people who grew up with two parents.
You're going to bring up the exception to the rule. It doesn't make the rule.
No.
It's an anecdote.
But
it's an anecdote.
No, but at the same time, though, you're saying that this is how I'm taking it. So I'm just saying the way you said it. My parents could have been better parents had one of them stayed home. Yes. But you also have people who had one parent, mainly the mom, who has stayed home. Kids grow up to be alcoholics.
Yep.
They're on drugs. They go to jail.
And they were both shitty parents.
I'm saying one person stayed home.
Yeah.
Usually the mom, who was there for the hugs and the kisses. They come home from school and, oh, honey, all this other stuff. And they turned out like this. Yet,
But you don't know their home life, actually.
I know. And that
actually,
just
wait,
because
hold on though. But actually, I do, because once again, my home life was not drugs and alcohol, and my father was out doing this, and my mother was out, sleeping with women, whatever. We were a family. I'm just saying.
Remember that.
So again, you're saying that they could have been better, but it's like, I'm just saying that's
because there's a whole lot that makes up a human being, and you're picking out the
understand that.
exception. What I'm saying is the best way to describe it is if you take every person that's ever murdered or serial murder, like you look at your Jeffrey Dahmers and your John Wayne Gacy's and you look into their lives, you notice there's always trauma. I think Jeffrey Dahmer, his mum was bedridden, his dad used to beat her, and he saw it all, and that's trauma. And that yet you could have the next person next door that saw all that and then went on to have a successful life. It's not an exact science,
And
but
I'm
it
not,
is.
and I'm
So,
not
so,
saying,
so listen. So by you not spanking your child, you're eliminating that. You're eliminating a good possibility that your child is not going to grow up and punch someone in the classroom or go on into a nightclub and beat someone or slap his wife about. You're eliminating that to the most that you can. Can you accept that?
But I also said where I got to the point of where I spanked my son. First of all, I did not. My son was not spanked every single day. I could probably on less than a handful of names how many times I have spanked my son. And I do believe that there are times when your children do something that they need that tap on the butt. And I even said that my son had a habit of running away when we were together. It's like, hold my hand, do this, stand here, whatever. And once again, you're trying to put stuff in the car, your groceries, whatever, you're trying to do this, whatever. My son had a habit of doing that. It's like, stop, don't do this. You're going to do this. You're going to have to go on timeout, whatever. When he ran away from me one time, he's running down the street and he was about to run into the street. He got that tap on that butt. Guess what? He never did it again. So I'm just saying that you can do this and you can do that, but I'm just saying there are times when I'm not saying you got to, every time your son, or daughter does something, oh my God, I'm gonna slap the shit out of you or anything. But I'm just saying, I do believe that there are times that your children need that tap on that butt. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I believe there's more than one way to skin a cat, and this is why I was going to make a joke at the start of this podcast, because I know this is a topic that is emotional for some, and I was going to say tonight you have to listen with your ears and not your heart, because I would never ever criticize my sister for the way she parents her children, but on a podcast you're going to say some things that are going to piss some mothers off, and especially if you're a mother who has vaccinated their kids or spanked their kids or went to work and I'm saying these things, it's going to piss you off. And that's the part that I hate about society, is the emotional response. It's like, but no. And if you listen and you let the person complete their sentence, you'll realize, especially with me, and that's why I always say I feel I should get some credit when I say, if the dad wants to stay home and make the food and get the kids up for school and do all that stuff, I'm all for it. If the woman wants to go and get the career, I'm all for it. And that should, I'm probably not going to get it, but I think that I should get some credit for saying that, because I do genuinely believe that one parent is better than zero parents. And it's not that you're a bad parent if you go to work. Maybe your circumstances dictate that you have to go to work. And I would say that's probably the answer for a lot of, because that's why I felt it was important to mention the 60s, because I think the propaganda and the way that they made women feel that they're oppressed by their husbands at that time. But no, go out and be oppressed by your boss and chase that money and give us more taxation. It's just a con.
Let me stop you right there, because there's one thing that I wanted to mention when you first said this. And the problem with the 60s was also that women were trapped in marriages that were unhealthy. And so while you may think that they needed to be that people need to be pair bonded, like I'm sure Luis thinks that people need to be in a coupleship. I think the dissolution of marriage that we have gone through will come back around full circle into healthier marriages, because women were trapped in marriages because they didn't have an income, they didn't have an out, they didn't have the ability to get out. And then they learned, oh, well, it's not okay to beat your wife. Okay, well, hopefully in the next 10, 20 years, we'll start seeing healthier marriages develop. We're in kind of the falling apart phase. But that's what I want to say to that. But I want to say one thing about this idea of spanking your children and not being a 2-parent household. Are you guys familiar with John Calhoun's utopian mouse experiment?
Yep.
So there's an old experiment, I don't know, 70s, whatever, 80s maybe, where a scientist looked at what happens if you give a mouse colony everything it needs. It's a little fucking Leave It to Beaver mouse colony. They have 2 mommies and daddies. They have all the food and everything they need. You know what those rats did? They ate each other. So this was a social experiment, and people take it to refer to the welfare state now, to say that how humans having no obstacles, or in this case, rodents having no obstacles, is really a bad thing. We need some obstacles to survive. But I'm applying it now to this idea of the 2-parent household. Just because there aren't 2 parents at home doesn't mean there's trauma. In fact, maybe dad needs to be at work because he's an asshole, and it's better if he's not around. So that just because there's only 1 parent at home doesn't mean there's going to be more trauma. Now, same thing with spanking. If you know dad is going to whoop your ass, that's traumatic. If you take the assessment now as an adult, I can't remember what it is. My friend made me take it. She's a therapist, and she was like, how did you often feel like you were going to get your ass whooped? That's trauma. If you often felt afraid of your parents, that's different than, Solid saying like her kid's at a theme park and she, instead of carrying him on a leash, smacked his ass, because children need to remember experiences certain times for safety. That's like an animal.
And I have seen those leashes that people put on kids, and I think that's ridiculous.
Well, right. So that's an example where instead of teaching them, now don't run away. No, they need to be on alert. That's kind of triggering their alert system, which I think is different than hitting your child out of anger or hitting them ceremoniously as a punishment to say, oh no, you're getting 5, ass whoopings when you get home. That's different. This is different. And the literature so far that I know hasn't caught up to this idea yet, but we're still in the no spanking era.
I want to add, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add, well, it's quick anyway. I view those analogies as secondary because of the situation we find ourselves in. I think because we've now sold ourselves, well, the 6 days and all that, women were conned into the workforce. We are now looking at secondary ways to combat the problems in society with children. I think if there's that 1 parent at home, that and then there's other things to contend with. I was on Solid Show on Thursday, and I had a list of about 10 things that I think are problematic to the way we live: porn, feminism, hookup culture. In fact, I have them here: the universities, government, social media. There was about 10 or 12. They're all things that are affecting our behaviors. And I know, again, we're talking mainly about feminism stuff tonight, but those 2 things you mentioned there almost feel to me, and you may be right and I may be wrong, because you have made me think as well, but I think that they are like, well, we're now in this situation, so now we should be able to give a spank, or we're just going to have to make do with 2 parents going to work, because now we find ourselves that we can't afford to have 1 parent at home. So to me, it's like you're making up. You know what I mean. I'll let Louise go.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I think I'll just be circling back around, and we can move on.
Well, what I will say, just to move the show on, because I know we're an hour and 15 now. Would you like to cover, because I think we should, quickly on the gender pay gap and relationships, how the paradigm is set up between men and women on those 2. Just quickly, if you want to do them quickly.
I'd rather do relationship. The pay gap is so blasé. Like, I just feel like we know what we're all going to say about the pay gap if we've done it. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but do you believe it's there?
Yes, but why is the question?
Yeah, because actually, I had a point to ask you, because I know you're in the scientific field, and I heard this said by Mr. Jordan Peterson, who I know I'm going to get a lot of boos in the comments for mentioning, but he mentioned that on the gender pay gap, what they do is they do a univariate univariate survey, which is not done. If you're any proper, scientist or whatever, you do a multivariate. But what they're doing is they're cherry picking. They're saying that men make this amount, women make this amount, and it's less, so men get more. And that's not the right thing to do. They're being very divisive doing that. What they should take into consideration is what careers do women choose and what careers do men choose. And women take more time off for appointments and things. They also take time off to get pregnant, which brings me again to paternity.
It's not the getting pregnant that takes time.
Oh, Lord, we just say we're gonna take off on Monday through Friday because we are gonna get pregnant. Okay.
No, you know what I mean. But it's like the other thing, and what we're talking about is that a man's world, a woman's world. The woman gets maternity leave. There's a lot of countries in the world that men still don't get that time off. So I think obviously with the topic tonight, there's a perfect example of where the world's set up to favor women. But I think the gender pay gap is, I just feel that I hear this still quite often, especially on these TikTok debates, that women are paid less than men, which is illegal. And I know that just because it's illegal, it doesn't happen, but I am against it. If a woman goes for a job that a man is getting paid more for that same job hourly, but what they don't do with this univariate survey is they don't take any of that into consideration. It's very divisive.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a scientist, I can tell you, the scientist's main goal used to be to create new knowledge and explore unanswered questions, but today it's to get a grant. And you need to publish papers for that. And in order to publish papers, sometimes you need the headline, and sometimes science isn't done well. And you can argue, oh, I did this test this way this time, but someone else has done it this way this time. So, and this is where like the replication crisis comes from, is because there's no incentive to repeat experiments and to look at them from a more highly scrutinized angle. So I agree with you. I think that, the pay gap exists for a number of reasons, the least of which is discrimination, although there is discrimination. There just fucking is. Like my PhD advisor, oh God, I hope she doesn't ever hear this, but when I got pregnant, or when I got into the lab, I was her first student. She was so excited to have me in the lab. She convinced me I was going to go to another lab. I didn't even want to study estrogen. I was going to study pain, or I was going to study virology. And she had children when she was in her teens. So she had her first 4 children before she was 20. And then she went to school and got her PhD and all this stuff. So I looked at her like, holy shit, you're amazing. And so she told me, you need to have a baby in the last year of grad school. So I'm like, okay, me taking notes, right? So I bought a house the first year, rehabbed it. And then I'm like, all right, it's time to have a baby. I just wrote about this in my Substack, actually. Like, this was a formative thing for me. So I was like, okay. And because the tenure clock starts and you don't have time for that. So you want to pick your time. This is what women have to do before 30 to figure out the career, the family, all this stuff. So then I had my baby. And before me, actually, someone got pregnant in the lab. And then she hired a female postdoc because she was all about like women, like, yes, we want women scientists. She hired a female postdoc, and another one got pregnant in the lab. She said to me, sorry, Tony, if you're hearing this, but she was like, I'm never hiring women again because we were all getting pregnant. And for a female investigator in science trying to climb the ladder, if you got 4 damn women out on maternity leave, that's your whole lab.
Yeah.
It's not optimizing society. That's for sure.
Okay, hold on for 1 second here.
She's frozen.
Oh, Natasha, I think you're frozen.
She is. But I just got a message she's trying to join. So let me. Okay. She'll have to.
Do you have any views on the gender pay gap, Solid? Just before we move on to relationships.
Wait, hold on. Let me.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, but let me kick the other one of you off. Let's see. Actually, I do believe that there is a pay gap. Let's see, 1, 2. This is what I want to kick off. I'm not able to kick that one off. I don't know why.
Oh, I think you could probably
actually,
X out. Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Okay. I think that there is a pay gap. I think that there has always been a pay gap, and I just think that that's just something that was formulated
Yeah,
by,
but you have to account for the things. It's not just like I go in for the same job as you, Solid, and I'll get paid more than you. That's not happening.
No. I'm saying if two people come in with the exact same thing, and we both know how to do the exact same job, and if the job pays $10 an hour, we should both get 10. Not one gets 10, the other one gets 8. But unfortunately, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
So
So do you want to move on to relationships? And when I mean relationships, I was going to touch on the divorce, like courts, child custody courts, and abortion and welfare. How do you think that favors the sexes?
It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
I think that courts should not, and this is where I think men tend to be hypocrites. On one hand, you go to court and the judge will more than likely just side in the favor of the woman just because she's female and she's a mom and she can take care of the kids, and the custody goes to her, and the guy has to pay her however much every month, whatever, unless this woman gets married, whatever. Some women don't even get married again just so they can, whatever. And I think that is absolutely wrong. But on the other hand, I think, don't automatically assume that women are the better person to take care of the child. Sometimes it's the father.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the mother who should be paying the father, whatever. So don't assume that women can be the nurturing ones when sometimes they are not. Sometimes they're the worst ones, and it's the dad.
Yeah. What about divorce as in, the courts as in with divorce? How do you feel it favors the sexes? Luis, you've been very quiet.
Yeah, Luis, I'll let you have that one because I'll come back to that one.
Okay.
Ask the question again. It's about divorces.
Yeah, how does the courts favor the sexes when it comes to divorce?
Well, I mean, we know that it's female-centric, and that's typically because more often than not, the man has more to offer than the woman does. That's just the way, as far as resources go. Mm-hmm. Men are typically top earners. Men typically have more resources, and so then in order to allow for the woman to have a similar lifestyle or something along those lines, it's going to be more in favor of the woman. And I don't know that that's wrong.
I think you might be hinging on the edge of wrong, just in recent statistics. Like anecdotally, someone very close to me actually has to pay maintenance to her husband now, who will barely have the children, and she has to because she has a high-paying job. So now women are earning more degrees on average than men. Mm-hmm. And so there's a crop of these, maybe I think your people call them beta cucks, maybe. So there's a crop of these men out there. A lot of them actually think they're the alpha chads, but they don't earn as much as women. They don't have any resources or property to speak of. And it's women in the millennial generation that are largely property owners. So in that bracket of people, I think you're wrong.
Yeah, but historically, over a longer period of time, what I'm saying is correct. Yours is relatively new. Right. That data is relatively new.
But didn't you and Solid say at the start of the show that academia favors men and women aren't getting the proper education?
Degree earners. Women earn more degrees. It doesn't mean they stay as scholars. So there's a demarcation there, right? So like women in academia, not so much. Women getting degrees through the roof.
That's
in UK, Ba, did you know in UK that the white male is the least likely demographic to go to college?
Yeah. We run the world though, so seemingly.
You white devils.
Okay, so what about because I'm just going to say because this might be the most triggering thing that I'll say tonight, and I'm leaving it for last. But I think that the system is set up to allow for women to make bad decisions and not suffer consequences. With the court system, with the two topics we've just covered, they can get divorced and they can get half, regardless whether they put in half or not. The children custody, they automatically get overwhelmingly get the children, regardless whether they're good mothers or not. And the father has to pay £3,500 here in the UK just to get court proceedings going. And then you've got the abortion or the pill. I don't really want to touch upon the pill, but I've heard this a lot today in my research, that the pill was like a huge, is it emancipation is the word? I don't know. That was huge for women, along with the introduction of white goods in the 60s that allowed women some free time, and they chose to go in and get careers, or they were conned into getting careers, whatever you want to say. And then obviously welfare for women. Okay, look at Solid. And then welfare for women for their children. So it allows them to this is why you're getting divorce rates, and relationships don't last anymore, because they're basically being able to replace men, which listen, you can bring up, and I was actually going to ask you, Natasha, and I genuinely mean, I'm not being, mean or anything, but do you have anything to back up the whole women back then were oppressed and couldn't get divorced? Because I genuinely, that's come up a few times on Solid Show, and I have nothing to back up other than what I feel, and that's why I'm asking you. I don't believe that narrative. I think there were men that oppressed their women, but I think generally that in those days, the morality, the morale, the men and women partnership was way better, way stronger. Hence, the 60, 65 wedding anniversaries that we no longer see anymore.
But he always stops at the 60s. He never goes back any further. He's like stuck in the 60s.
No.
But I will be quiet. Natasha, I'm sorry.
So Bob, there is actually quite a bit of evidence in the form of legislation. So if you look at numbers wise, women were not allowed to work, so they're not allowed to get degrees, they're not allowed to work, and men didn't have to pay them shit if they got divorced. So the man held all the cards. So whether he was good or bad, if you want to leave me, I ain't paying you shit if I don't have to. So things like alimony and maintenance were set up initially to protect women in abusive situations. So it's like, we could call it welfare in a sense, but it's like, it was a protective way to help women get back on their feet after giving their entire lives, sometimes from 17 years old, to a family, right? And to be able to take care of their children. So there's a lot of single, my grandmother, for example, got divorced from her husband, who was very abusive. My mom was born in 61. She got divorced in 70-ish, I think. And she went and started a business on her own. She was a kick-ass woman, had an 8th grade education, but had no protection from him, had no support from him whatsoever. Most people are not like that. They can't do it. So yeah, there's a lot of data to suggest that women they had to stay in marriages to survive.
When are you talking about that women couldn't work? Like, I'm genuinely curious, because I will go and look this up. I just, with the type of person I want to know about
women
laws.
Get hired.
I always say, if there are any laws, like I recently heard, and again, this could be false, I don't know, it could be right. I recently heard that in some states in America, still today, if a woman wants to go and get her tubes tied, she's told she needs the consent of her husband.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, if that's true, then I'll stand there and fight with you, because that's disgusting. Yeah. Like, I'm all for that. Anytime the argument comes up with race or any subject in general, if I always ask, tell me about the laws, because that's, to me, you can fix the laws, we can petition, we can fight against them, but people hating each other and that division will now, I don't think it'll ever stop. I'm a bit of a pessimist. I don't think you're ever going to get people to stop, unless it's done by force.
If we have different races, there will never not be racism.
Yeah, pretty much.
But also don't forget that there are, at least here in the U.S., there are a lot of laws that have been on the books since like the 1800s that have never changed. And if the judge wants to say, well, back in 1810, it says you're not supposed to, if they want to do that, they can. So there are a lot of laws that are on the books you know, that women, I mean, and I think in Wisconsin, I know it was true up to about 5 years ago. I don't know if it still is. A woman cannot get credit if she's married unless her husband is the co-signer.
See that, just to highlight, this is the way my mind works with stories like that. Now, again, I could be completely wrong, but when you told me that the other day about the credit thing, the way I see the world, and I know this is like conspiracy theory, so you can take it with a pinch of salt, but to me, that sounds like something like, I mean, if I go and get credit for a house or a car, a 100 grand Ferrari or something like that, I'm not going to get it unless I get someone to guarantor for me. That's what it's called here in the UK. So I just wonder if what you're just reciting there is some,
I'm saying on the books in Wisconsin, if I were to go apply, if I lived in that state, if I went to apply for a MasterCard, Visa, whatever, I have to have my husband's name on that app, or else I will not get it.
Yeah.
Whereas,
I don't know about that.
So
that's pretty based, as is the whole two-time thing. It's really based, and here's why. Because when you're married, you're no longer just you. You are a unit with your wife, and your wife is one with you, and the man is the head of the household. And then this attack on the nuclear family, to where, like, okay, you know what? No fault divorce. Go ahead, get divorced if you want to. That's an affront on the family. This whole, if you're a woman, you're a grown woman, you're married though, you don't need your husband's permission. That's insane to me. That's an affront on the family, because when you're joining a person in marriage, it's a lifelong commitment, and you are no longer just yourself.
Yeah, but why doesn't the man have to also get the wife's permission? That's kind of
right. Exactly.
Because the man, this is the chain of command. There's chain of commands in companies.
That's
there's
antiquated.
chains of command.
Well, okay.
Yes, there is. I'm the one that's going to risk my life to protect my family, not the other way around.
Maybe in your marriage,
not
in everybody's marriage.
Risk my life
no, this is
my family. I absolutely would.
No, so here's the thing. Men, because society, this is one of the few things I agree with Andrew Tate. It is underpinned by violence, and men are the most capable of violence.
Are Hobbesian.
It's just reality, man. The world is violent. It's a violent place.
But that's
so
a
who's
theory.
going to be the protector?
That's a theory, bro.
We look in reality. How is every nation formed?
That's a theory.
How is every reality formed?
There's no evidence for it.
Yes, there is. The American Revolution.
There's just
the
as
only
much
way
evidence for
America came
evolution.
to be. The American Revolution came to be because of violence. The European nations became to be because of violence. China is what it is today because of the warring state periods. Violence. Japan is what it is today because of violence.
Yeah,
Hong Kong was ripped away from China, then given back to China because of violence.
No longer, though. No longer are we really seeing violent war.
No, we still are in wars all over the place. There's
but
like
they're
four.
not violent.
It's forged. Yes, they are in different ways. They can be
if
spiritual
words are
attacks.
violence, then yeah.
I consider spiritual attacks as a form of violence. So there's violence all the time. We live in a state of conflict. We breathe. In the air we breathe is conflict.
So wait, spiritual attacks are violence, and how are spiritual attacks made?
Well, they would be through, you can go through the conspiratorial mind where it's like MK Ultras, mind control, programming. I think there's a lot of spells that are casted on us, such as, any ideologies are a form of spells. You can call them viruses.
Spells an ideology, like believing in spells, that is an ideology.
I don't know that I would consider that. I think that spells are a real thing.
It's a belief. Like ideology is belief.
I could maybe add some thought, like the basically I say that the brainwashing from the media, like they put things into programs and films and movies so that when we watch them, we're more desensitized to accepting them. And the example
programming. You want to call it a spell. That's
I would say it's a ritual. It's ritualistic.
And it's also ritualistic. Yes,
it's control. There's definitely philosophy like Deleuze. Talked a lot about control society. That's a real. But again, these are theories, right? So your idea that life is nasty, brutish, and short, like Hobbes would say, that you know, it's that we're founded on violence. That's a theory. That's your theory. That's, I mean, you can say it's human nature, but why we're not necessarily like nailed to our nature. We have a cognitive override. We have a brain that most creatures don't have, and a cortex that allows us to override a lot of those impulses. So why do we have to live as though we live like animals and like other animals? We don't. We have a choice. That's the weird thing about humans. We don't have to live like the world is violent.
No, I agree. And I'm not saying that all of the world is violent. I think that ultimately the world is a very beautiful place because I believe that God created it to be good and it's beautiful. But because of human nature, it becomes violent. And so it's human nature that ends up corrupting it.
But what I'm saying is human nature doesn't have to be that way. We have cognitive override. We have the ability to override our violent nature.
I 100% agree.
Like Solid doesn't have to spank her son anymore.
Right. But yeah, so I think, you know, the man is the protector in the home. And if you're responsible,
disagree on that.
It's just physically factual.
Theoretically.
No, it has to be physical and biological factual.
What I was going to say, just to kind of maybe help out with what Lewis is saying, and forgive me if I'm getting you wrong, Lewis, but like I always think about, like, here's an example, like the inherent ability for women to seek and find the dominant male is a thing, that a skill or something that's stuck with women from day one, and it's been the reason that we are still here on this planet is all down to that. Like, women's ability, like in the animal kingdom, you know, the men fight it out and then the woman chooses the alpha. That is an amazing thing that is inherently for women, and that is being lost now. And on my list, I've got there like the alcohol and the hookup culture, where women don't vet men anymore. And I've actually got this written down. I never thought about it at the time, but on your show on Thursday, Solid, one of your well-known Colin, your friend, mentioned that women have what she was taught when she was younger. Women have the power, and at the time I was like, yeah, you do. And I was sticking up for her. I was like, that's amazing. That was really good of her saying that. But then the more I think about it, they did back in this is why I find it hard to believe that in the 40s and 50s and earlier that the whole, like, women were oppressed by men. But anyway, we'll leave that. But what I'm saying is now that's been diluted down because women are finding their men now in nightclubs after, 10 bucketfuls of beer, going home with them, sleeping with them, the hookup culture. And then they're now getting pregnant to these men and realizing, oh, I can't live with this guy. This guy's an asshole. He's a jerk. He's not going to provide for me. So this is where I am pushing hard on women with that, because
but men are also taking them home, and men are also asking them to spread their legs, and men are also dipping in. So
yeah, I agree. But men will only be a higher standard if they're held accountable. I admit that.
I agree.
Yeah,
that I agree. The Adam and Eve, I agree. I do agree. Women are very persuasive.
But you're right. But men still should have some responsibility.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that you're completely wrong, but I just pushing back that men do have
I would say this. I would go as far as saying that men are the problem for pretty much every single problem in society today.
I don't agree with that.
Because men are fucking weak today. They are.
Yeah.
There's been a feminization of men. It's not
their fault, though. It's not their fault. It's women too. Women have pushed. I think you're right. Women have pushed so hard with feminism that they have emasculated men the whole time.
But who allowed it? The men allowed it. The men should have said, "No, woman, get back in the kitchen."
Women are persuasive.
Take off your shoes. Put on an apron.
It'll get better.
Put the turkey in the oven.
Okay, Louise, I have to say this. Oh, hell no.
I feel like, Louise, I'm pretty sure your wife is like a bulldog. I'm going to guarantee, like, she wears the pants around that household.
You can think what you want to think.
You would never say it. You would never say it.
You haven't seen my live streams. My wife is usually around me with my I don't just talk what I live what I'm saying. I truly practice what I'm saying. My wife is currently pregnant, and she was making us dinner in the kitchen before I got on here.
I make dinner for my family too. I mean, I do that, right? I think a strong woman does that. A strong woman does it because she wants to, and she knows she's probably better suited to do it. I don't think that makes your wife less than.
Well, they do say behind every good man is a strong woman, and I do believe that women, as much as things that they were not allowed to do, that a lot of these strong men would not be where they are if it weren't for women. But
I think a better way of putting it is saying basically that one half of the relationship is basically complementing and supporting the other to go and crush. Basically, they're going out, they're working hard, and everything at home's taken care of. Those are distractions. Paying bills, making phone calls, making appointments, looking after the children. It's a big job, and that's what I'm saying. We're not downplaying that as you've got it easy at home. I often wonder with our women, like, do you really enjoy going to work? Who likes setting alarms for 7, 8 o'clock in the morning and going to work?
I want to do what I want to do. I don't want to go. I quit my job last December, and I was making a fuck ton of money, just as much as my husband. But I was like, I can't take it anymore. My daughter's 10. So it wasn't necessarily, I did quit my lab job, my academic job where I was working 12 hours a day to spend more time with my family. Strangely enough, a traveling job would spend more time with your family than an academic job. But I quit my job because I wanted more fulfillment. Like I wanted to do what I wanted to do, not to just plug away in a fucking cubicle. I never worked in a cubicle. I don't know why I said that, but to just do bullshit work. But I think women, not all women have access to that. I'm not going to use the word privilege because I hate that word. I hate the whole thing that it represents right now. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but a lot of women don't have the opportunity to go and do what they want to do. They have to do what they have to do. Yeah. So it's not that they want to go. It's that they have to go, because also a lot of women can't count on these men because, like you said, these men,
I agree.
We are getting to the 2
hour.
When Bob and I first started doing this show, and the same with my show, we were like, okay, we're gonna keep it to an hour. But then everybody, literally, I have enjoyed mostly, by no offense to you, I have enjoyed the interaction between Luis and Natasha. And Luis, even though I disagree with a lot of things you say, I've enjoyed listening. Because one thing I do like to hear what people have to say, and you have a lot to say, and Natasha has a lot to say. And Bob, he's like my baby brother. I just want to slap him sometimes, but
you guys are cute. I love it. I love what you're doing here. I love what you're doing here. I really do.
Thank you. But you guys I have thoroughly, and I truly mean this, I have enjoyed this, and I would love for both of you guys to come back on, even if maybe you guys want to come up with a topic that's not so silly. But if you guys want to keep going, we can keep going. I just want to say we're at the 2. I don't know if you guys,
I do have somewhere to be.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you want to promote your stuff before we end it? We'll start with you, Natasha, if you want to promote your...
Oh, I'd love to. Yes, I would love to. If you want more from me, the best place you could go to support me is my Substack. It's theorygang.substack.com.
Can you put it in the chat?
I'll put it in the chat. But that's where I produce a newsletter, and also you can get both of my podcasts in your email delivered. So they're on Spotify, everything. So my one podcast is Syllogism with a J. My other podcast is Neo Academia. So that's my pitch.
Awesome.
Okay. And Luis, if you also want to put it in the chat.
Yeah. MOT Media is the media company in which I started. We have, like I said at the beginning of it, political and cultural discussions pretty much every day. And then Tuesdays and Fridays, my co-host Mick joins me, and he adds his perspective in it. We disagree on some things, but we're mostly aligned on a lot. And then on it's going to be Wednesdays, we're going to have our sports channel back up. I have nothing to do with that. I do not watch sports. That is not my thing. But yeah, so MOT Media, you can find us on TikTok under MOT News. and MOT Today 1.
And
Awesome.
by the way, the chat is disabled, so I sent it to you in private, Solid.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And I do have that. So can I copy and put it into the chat
Yes, please.
so other people can have it? Okay. And Luis, did you want to put anything of yours into the chat?
Yeah, I will add it right now.
Okay. There we go. Well, you guys have been a blast.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Likewise,
having
this was fun.
I'll
This was
go
really
as far
fun.
as this has been my favorite episode that we've done. I thoroughly enjoyed the back and forth between you 2
Mhm.
earlier.
Likewise.
And a lot of what Luis has said, when you said the word oppression, it made me a little bit, because deep inside I can't agree with that, but you kind of redeemed yourself to me, and it's made me curious with the whole having order and shaming and that kind of like structure is better than liberalism, because I totally identify with the whole do what thou wilt and the Aleister Crowley stuff, the satanic stuff, which is basically, you know, open border, like basically do what you want. I think there does need to, so it's an aspect that I need to look into more, but it was really interesting to hear that, and yeah, we'll definitely have you back on, and I look forward to listening to both your shows more.
Mhm.
I'm a podcast fanatic. I go into work and I listen to podcasts all day because I'm a welder, so I'll definitely be on that on Monday morning. So
Well,
thanks for.
I just want to make one more comment and ask Louise something. If you guys notice, when you guys were going back and forth, Bob and I was just sitting there just enjoying it. But Louise, in terms of your shows, what time are you on?
Yeah, so typically Monday through Friday, it's 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Okay. So that's not,
Now,
okay.
there are times where I have to adjust it because I do have a business outside of it. So sometimes I have meetings and things like that take priority because that's the real moneymaker, the other one. So
Okay. And Natasha, what time are you usually on?
I don't do live for my show, but I release Wednesdays. So our
Wednesday.
next
Okay.
release will probably be in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Okay, guys, thanks for joining us, and it's been a pleasure. And do we have a topic for next weekend? Solid.
We are actually talking about relationships where we're going to have two people who are not married on the show, and we're having a transgender person who we had before on our trans show come on to talk about the relationship aspect. So you guys may want to check out that transgender show. She was I actually liked her. So yeah.
Awesome. Right, thanks, guys. We'll see you next week. Bye.
All right.
you guys.